Hey guys, this is Josh Graffam with Umpqua Feather Merchants. Today we're going to tie a size 12 Hustler nymph. In the vise here, I have an XC400 jig hook, and again, like I said, it's a size 12. I also have a jig bomb bead and a 4 mil. So I'm going to take some 0.015 lead and do about 5 or 6 wraps behind the bead, and then I'm going to break it off up front. There we go. And as I'm going to push it forward, I'm going to turn the bead up and push it right up to the bead. I'm going to take my thread. I'm using 12-aught black thread. I'm going to create a little thread dam behind. I'm going to pop this back piece of lead off. I like to taper the thread up right behind the bead. I want to create quite a bit of thread behind that bead. I want to make sure it doesn't slide around there. One nice tapered body. Come all the way up again. Like I said, some extra thread behind the bead and then taper it out nice and even. Come back to here. And then I'm going to cut off the thread right there. So we're going to actually add a tiny dab of crazy glue to the bottom of this bead. Like I said, I don't want this bead to move around once it's centered on the hook. And I like to add just a little bit of crazy glue right there. So as we come back, we are going to taper this back half. And then we're going to take a CDC feather, and I'm looking for some of the more speckled feathers in the CDC. And I'm going to strip off about 8 or so fibers from there. I'm going to set that in there. You want that to be about the length of the shank. Some people like to go a little longer, some people go thinner, but I like to keep it about the length of the shank. I'm going to tie right over the top of it and taper that body right up. Even that out right there. Taper the body a little bit more, and then make sure that that's nice and straight and sticking out the back. So then we're going to take a piece of a synthetic quill body. I like the UV colors. I believe this is a UV white or UV pearl. We're going to take this quill body. We're going to use this as a rib. We're going to set it down on the shank and tie it down. Pull it back a little bit. Get it secured to the shank of the hook. And I'm going to set that in my little material holder there. So once we have that there, we need to do the body, which is going to be any kind of hare's ear. I need to find it. I have done something with it right here. Sorry. We're going to use a hare's ear dubbing. I like the darker hare's ear dubbings. There's lots of versions of this. I'm just going to pick out, actually, I'm going to wax my thread first real quick. I just add a little bit of dubbing wax here. I like to touch dub these for the most part. I like to use a spikier dubbing, and then I'll touch dub right up to the shank. Once I have it touched up pretty good, I'm adding a little bit extra because this one's a size 12. I tend to try and be pretty sparse with the dubbing in general, and then pick it out afterwards. Once it's done there, tighten up the thread a little bit and wrap the body all the way to the front. I like to keep these nice and thin. The idea is that the profile of this fly should be thin but buggy, kind of an interesting combo. You don't want it too thick. Add a little bit extra dubbing. You don't want to make it too thick. You want to be able to pick it out, but you want that thin profile sink rate. So once you have that body dubbed, you're going to wrap your synthetic body quill. You can use any kind of flash type of rib. If I was using a straight flash, I would definitely counter rib it with some mono or some other wire. But this synthetic body quill itself is pretty strong. Even when you tie it tight, I don't find it breaks as easy. I think one of the keys to this fly and to flies like this is to keep it pretty natural, but to have that light speckle or light kind of hot spot underneath the dubbing. I think it's really critical to not overdo the hot spots and make them too bright. So the next step, I'm going to add a CDC collar to this fly. There's a lot of different ways to do that. You can do that with dubbing loops. The easiest way for me to do it, and just kind of the quickest really, is I'll take a CDC feather, and I'm looking for one with a relatively thin stem, and I'm going to kind of part the feather like this. Take that end piece off, and I'm going to tie the tips in right here on this side. Once I tie the tips in, 3 or 4 wraps, I'll cut the little tiny tip off of there. And then I'm going to take a pair of hackle pliers, and I am just going to wrap this little CDC feather 2 or 3 times. I like to brush it back as I'm going. There we go. Brush it back as I'm going. Try and keep that stem straight. That's what's nice about these hackle pliers, is that they spin with you as you're going. I like to do 2 full wraps. And then as I finish up, I will wrap the thread in front. There we go. And come up and over. When you're coming through the CDC, it's important to kind of wiggle your thread and get between the fibers. I've done 2 wraps now. I'm going to tighten this up with a couple more wraps. I'm going to cut the excess off. There we go. So I'll come 1 wrap in front of the stem. And now I'm good to cut off the excess. Pull the excess fibers out. I think what's key on the CDC is to keep it webby and buggy. I don't like to trim up the CDC. I like to leave it nice and long. I only have a handful of long fibers there, but I really want to keep that, like I said, nice and webby, buggy. I'm going to come back with a couple thread wraps right over the stem to make sure that it's secured in there. I'm going to cover up this with a collar. So I'm not too concerned, like I said, about exactly how long those CDC fibers are. I just want to make sure it's nice and buggy, but not overdressed. I think it's important to keep it sparse and not overdressed. The next little piece, we're going to do a black collar. I like UV blacks. I like any kind of shiny black, but I'm going to, again, be pretty sparse on this. I think that's key to a lot of these jig flies and Euro nymphs, is to keep them nice and sparse. So I'm going to go nice and tight with this little collar right here. I'm going to come 1, 2 wraps right through the middle of it. I'm not being too careful there. I want to make sure it secures and stays there. I'm going to push up a little bit more, come right over the middle of it. So you have that nice dark collar right there. 1 more wrap. And then we're going to take a whip finisher. And we are going to whip finish the head right here. I like 3 wraps. Tighten it down. And then I like to hit my thread with a tiny bit of glue or head cement, just a little bit. And I'll do 1 more set of whip finishes. You can trim it up. Again, I like to keep it a little buggy. You also can brush out the dubbing fibers and the CDC fibers if you want to make it, kind of stand out a little bit more. But in general, I want to keep it tight and compact and make it look, like I said, buggy, a little bit flashy, but still natural. I love this under flash with that body rib underneath. I like the little bit of flash in the dubbing collar, but I want to keep this in general real natural. So that's the Hustler, size 12, in the natural color, in the light, tied with a jig bomb bead. Awesome Euro pattern, everything kind of a caddis / mayfly emerger. This is an everyday pattern for me all year round, and don't be out there without it.